You want to talk about a movie that somehow never fails to make me cry? Oh my goodness. The Iron Giant every frickin' time just crushes me. Absolutely destroys me. You just watched The Iron Giant. No matter how many times I watch The Iron Giant, there's something about that film that just strikes at my heart. I don't know. It's just such a well-told story. And despite this movie being pretty unanimously loved by everyone who has ever seen it, it has a 97 on Rotten Tomatoes, I believe. This movie was a box office disaster. It was a $50 million movie that only made $30 million. And there are a lot of very interesting reasons for that. But I think ultimately one of them was that this movie is such a tweener, where it is a movie that it is a children's movie, but it is so adult in its focus and its messaging, right? The kind of like war hawking American Red Scare government approaching everything with a gun and a smile, and more bombs will fix this, and get under your desk to survive a nuclear strike. And I don't know if the typical Disney film crowd was ready for an animation with such profound commentary in it. I think we were still in the Fox and the Hound and an era of that, where people were like, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy and that's it. And having a movie about a space invading robot that learns how to love, I don't know if people got it. But in my opinion, it is one of like the last great hand-drawn animations ever. Came out in 1999, so a lot of you are probably babies back then. And it's originally a Ted Hughes novel. A lot of things are adapted, kind of tweaked, but it was originally a novel by Ted Hughes. One thing that is very interesting that I've heard before is that The Iron Giant, in its original film adaptation, was supposed to be a Pete Townsend musical. So after Peter Townsend made Tommy, he was supposed to make Iron Giant, which is really interesting. In case you don't know who Peter Townsend is the lead singer of The Who. And if you've never seen Tommy, it's basically the musical opera around Pinball Wizard. Here, I can show you a little bit of it right here. Another movie that fucking rules, about a deaf, dumb, and blind kid who basically becomes a Christ-like figure. Not the lead singer, the guitarist, sorry. Anyway, yeah. Cool little fact there. Yeah, the other thing that you guys didn't know that I mentioned is that the Iron Giant is voiced by Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel, not someone you think about really being a voice actor, but he voice acted in this movie for a grand total of 53 words. And later, that voice acting career would go on to another of the most famous, seldom spoken characters in Groot, who somehow famously has even less words. If you enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy, you can pay a little homage to the Iron Giant and Vin Diesel's first major acting job, or major voice acting job, sorry. So the interesting thing about the Iron Giant is, even though it kind of had a really rough box office, it's put together what I would consider a rabid cult following. There are a lot of people who, after this film left the movie theater, found it and fell in love with it, including myself, and have watched it over and over and over and over again. And it's one of those amazing movies that just, no matter how many times you watch it, really just, it grows on you every time. Brad Bird is the director of this movie. And Brad Bird went on to have a really, really, really great career at a small company you might know as Pixar. I think that is correct. Yes, it is. And he made such movies as Ratatouille, The Incredibles 2. So he has had a pretty great career in animation after The Iron Giant, despite The Iron Giant not performing amazingly well. You know, there are so many great film documentaries on The Iron Giant because a lot of people really love this movie. I would recommend you go watch some of them if at all you like this movie, because this movie kind of feels like an oddity. It's a movie that had not a huge budget, but obviously so much freaking love went into this film. It had a big budget, but not a giganto budget. And they put so much elbow grease and love into this movie. Yeah. Here, this is one of the essays mentioning what I was talking about, when the animators are given half the time and money that Disney gets. And it's about how this movie was made on...
You get this.
Here.
You're watching a movie from when you were a kid, a movie you loved, that you would watch again and again and admire before you had any notion of good form, because for some unknown reason, you had convinced yourself that this movie was something special. And now, looking back with wiser eyes, you realize you were absolutely right.
Nice job.
For me, that film is The Iron Giant, and it was one of the last great American hand-drawn animated pictures.
Our next movie is a faded feature from acclaimed writer-director Brad Bird of The Simpsons fame. It's based on a children's book by British poet laureate Ted Hughes. The Iron Giant tells the story of a friendship between a young boy and a giant robot.
That is a tree. Rock, tree. Get it? That's right!
By the mid-1990s, every studio in Hollywood was looking to emulate the success of Disney feature animation, and that of course included Warner Brothers, who had just acquired a young animator by the name of Brad Bird.
Very happy to have you all here. I think you're gonna have a blast.
This guy is Superman. Sure, he's famous now, but he started off just like you. Crash landed on Earth, didn't know what he was doing.
I sort of ran into it at Warner Brothers. It was actually brought there to be developed as a musical.
There you go.
Kind of a rock musical.
There you go.
Townsend and Des McAnuff.
Yep.
Going in.
That's what I told you.
Kind of some of my own ideas.
With the gun.
They liked the notion of what if a gun had a soul.
Get back!
I'm gonna pee real quick. Sorry, I'll change that later.
Of typical feature animation. Disney had 5
Squirtle
years,
keycap.
he had 2.5. Plus, most of the top talent was already working for Disney and DreamWorks, leaving Bird with whoever was left. Young artists, retired animators, the outcasts, the rebels, the troublemakers.
Sorry, kid. I didn't really see anything. But if we don't stick up for the kooks, who will?
Is my son bothering you, sir?
For most directors, cutting an animation team's time in half would mean an impossible task. But not these guys. Hand-drawn animation is one of the all-time labor-intensive art forms. 1 frame at a time, 12 frames per second, for 90 minutes. As producer Alison Abate put it, it was like running a marathon race where you're sprinting the whole way. But in return, Brad Bird was given more creative freedom to make his movie than any director at Disney ever had.
And just to put it in context, Tarzan started a year before us, and they'll be finished with animation in 3 weeks. With 40 more animators.
Thanks for the scrap, Floyd. sorry I can't pay you more, but it's got this this large bite out of it.
That's why I'm selling it. It's got a large bite out of it.
I've done this.
You know, I don't want to have any apologies or excuses for this thing at the end of it. I honestly think that we can kick royal ass and totally stand right up next to Disney with, you know, a lot less money and time and just go, you know, we're here and you know, deal with us.
But working on such a strict budget meant there could be no mistakes. If you mess up during the animation process, then you won't have time or money to fix it later on. So to avoid this, Bird and his team did something new. They pioneered moving story reels by feeding individual storyboarded frames into a burgeoning little program called Adobe After Effects. This allowed the team to quickly animate a previs version of the film in a way no one in the industry had ever seen before, to figure out what was working and what wasn't.
I guess that would be okay to eat. It's been there for months. He can't say a lot of words yet, but he understands things pretty good.
I am not a gun.
I wouldn't be afraid. I'd say, yeah, we're PG. That's what we are. We're Warner Brothers, you know. There's Disney, and we're Warner Brothers, you know.
I am a real fan of animation that tries to move in new directions. I love the Disney traditional animated films, but I also like a film like this, which is really telling a story. No little sidekicks, no little songs, no little dancing teacups.
Brad Bird was determined to separate the Iron Giant from the work of other animation studios, and that also extended to the style of the animation.
Kind of day in a town very much like your own. But then, suddenly, without warning,
Atomic Holocaust.
Made in 1957, the hand-drawn world was deeply inspired by American artists like Edward Hopper and Norman Rockwell, after which the fictional town in the Iron Giant is named. But it's the design and animation of the giant himself that's probably the most interesting. See, unlike the rest of the film, the character of the Iron Giant was actually rendered with CG. To give him weight and the feeling that he didn't quite belong.
Fascinating.
This isn't the first movie to combine 2D and 3D animation, but it was the first to do it with a central character and in a way that didn't feel like two different styles from two different movies. But what about the actual design of the giant? Well, for that, Brad Bird went to the best.
I was actually able to con a friend of mine, Joe Johnston, who's a tremendous artist, and he was one of the top designers of the first 3 Star Wars films. I managed to kind of lure him over to help design the giant.
Souls don't die.
I think he did a tremendous job.
From there, Brad Bird and production designer Mark Whiting modified him just enough to create a robotic character who is still fully capable of expression, using 2 sets of eyelids and a jaw that doesn't just open and shut, but slides. Allowing the giant to emote and reflect on the film's essential themes of humanity, friendship, and violence.
It's dead.
Well, I think that we tried to make something that was an emotional film, and there's always a risk when you do that you're going to be caught doing it, and that you're going to fail because you're kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve. But we wanted to take those risks, and we believed in it, and fortunately, the film has stuck around.
I think film critic Drew McQueenie put it best when he said, "The Iron Giant is not a film that people like casually. It is a film that people love dearly, and the people who have seen it share it with the people who haven't. This is what The Iron Giant is to me, and the reason, if you had yet to discover it on your own, I'm very proud to share it with you today. As always, I'm Danny Boyd. Thank you so much for watching."
There you go. Check out Cinema Sticks. They make a lot of great stuff. Yeah, but Iron Giant again is one of those movies that it's just endured. And I think what he was trying to make obvious is that so much love went into this movie. It really was a labor of love that people didn't get. But I think there are a lot of great pieces of art that transcend a first impression, right? When you look back at like Arrested Development, an Iron Giant or a Shawshank Redemption, if you really make something incredible, it doesn't matter what its first reception is like, right? Because people will find it. An audience will find it. And, that's just more evidence that you should make what you want to make and make something beautiful and impassioned and wear your heart on your sleeve. Ultimately, I feel like a lot of animation kind of recently has lost a little bit of that soul, where they're getting so formulaic that it's hard to kind of enjoy the way we used to. But the famous Anus, thank you so much. But movies like The Iron Giant are just scratch such a itch for me. And, I love every character in it. Dean, Hogarth's mom, obviously. Iron Giant feels a lot like a Miyazaki film. Yeah, I think it kind of does. It does feel like an American Miyazaki film. But again, what I like to do is I like to show movies that I feel like you might not have seen because of a various barrier, right? And we started tonight talking about, and I did this very knowingly, talking about cartoons and how a lot of cartoons get kind of ignored, like Primal. Just like the subtitle or the black and white film or the international film or whatever barrier it is, don't allow those barriers to keep you from watching great stuff. Man, go watch cartoons, go watch international films, go watch black and white films, go watch short films, go watch, films from all over or TV from all over, because you'll really enrich yourself. And ultimately, probably the only reason this film didn't succeed is because people limited themselves. They saw something that they didn't really understand. And even when the critics came out, like Siskel and Ebert, and said how amazing this movie was, people were like, I don't know. I have that impulse all the time. There are movies that I'm told are great, and I go, I don't know. And then I watch them and I go, why was I holding out? Iron Giant's a great example of that, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this movie before and went, it's a movie for kid. It's a cartoon. I don't know, blah, blah. Go see great movies. Doesn't matter what they look like. Doesn't matter what they sound like. Great movies are great movies. Great art is great art. It'll have an effect on you.